Well, I've got the former popular Australian commercial radio host on news talk stations 2UE and 2GB and to stations nationally on the line right now. Our most politically incorrect correspondent of the week, I think, Jim Ball. Welcome back to TNT Radio.
Yeah, incorrect indeed. How you going, Chris? Good?
I'm doing very well, mate. Thank you. Yeah. Stacks to talk about today, so we'll get through them as quickly as we can.
I looked at the list and I thought, good grief. We're going for an hour or so, are we?
Yeah, something like that. But the Albanese government's migration strategy was released this morning.
Yeah.
It includes a 50% cut to the net long-term and permanent movement of people into and out of Australia. The permanent migration and humanitarian programs remain largely unchanged. But more will be done to link with state and territory governments to deal with infrastructure as a result of migration numbers. I've heard that thousands of times before. They never do it. The inflexible occupation list will be ditched and replaced by a new specialist skills pathway at a threshold of $135,000. Now, this will make it easier for bosses to bring in the highly skilled talent needed to help develop local industry and train them up. It's a major change to the old ad hoc system we had, where I thought that treasurers often ran the immigration program to try and simply get more revenue to make the budget look good.
Yeah. Look, to be honest, I'm not sure. Even today, I'm not sure who runs. They can come up with their policies and make their grand plans, make their announcements. But in about, I don't know, a week, tomorrow, we'll have forgotten. And we'll think now, what did they say they were going to do? We won't have, it won't be relevant. I mean, it'll be relevant, but to the average person going about their day, it'll mean nothing. I think it's good that they're cracking down on the loopholes. I thought I was back at Luna Park yesterday. They started talking about ghost houses. But they were talking about ghost houses. Now they're talking about fake college degrees or fake colleges. What else? What was else on the list? And all of that, just on that point about fake colleges and dodgy degrees, you might say. I remember back in the Howard years, probably the Keating years as well, even the Hawke years, they spoke about education as being an export industry, right? A lot of international students come here and we educate them and they go back and we develop a reputation as being a high quality educational industry. What this does, these dodgy degrees and fake colleges and so on, that dilutes and pollutes our reputation. It makes us look dodgy. And when you think about it, it's all for money. That's what it comes down to. But so that's just on the educational side of things. But just on the other aspect there, I noticed Claire Armstrong today. She said, with housing demand beyond ridiculous, rental availability almost non-existent, roads choked to a standstill, schools and childcare running out of spaces, the idea of historically high numbers of people entering the country will undoubtedly stir up a lot of community emotion. She goes on to say, and this is the point, this associated link between migration and services is fraught for a federal government, given that states control most of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
But voters don't care. I mean, here they are making an announcement, but in reality, they don't actually control the outcome. It's the states. And as she points out, voters really don't care about whose responsibility it is. They just want it fixed. They want the states talking to the feds and talking to each other.
Yeah, what was the portfolio that the previous government created? It was it population or something similar like that? So that was an intention to try and work through the difficulties of providing infrastructure for what would be an increased population in Australia.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether it worked or not because I don't think it lasted a full term of government. And we don't have it now. So I don't know. They keep saying that you can make that happen, but mostly you've got, unless you've got a situation like we have now, mostly you've got a situation where there are different governments in the states and territories, and they're not going to deal too well with a federal government of a different nature and a different party.
Look, migration, whichever party's in power, that's got to be a rate and a capacity that is sustainable, to use that's the buzzword these days, sustainable, and that can be absorbed both culturally and economically. So it's got to be sustainable, and it's got to be at a rate and capacity that we can absorb in terms of the economy. That means jobs, and culturally, And we're seeing, like what's going on at the moment with the Israel business and all the demos in the streets. Maybe we'll get to that later with the actors and the arty community. But yeah, there's a lot to be done there in cultural, and so this comes back to numbers. If you're overwhelmed, it just gets out of control.
Yeah, but because the headline says that the government is cutting migration by half, and that seems to be a couple of the headlines, that's got to be a good thing for the Albanese government at a time when they need some positives.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, what was it, 500,000 in the last 12 months?
Yeah.
Net. Yeah. So you take whatever's left Australia, what's come into Australia, and the difference is your 500,000 or whatever it was, 500 or something. Yeah. It's a huge number.
Yeah.
And okay, mind you, here we are talking about 500,000 in a country the size of Australia, but America it's like 8 million in 2 years.
Yeah. The 8 million in 2 years.
Yeah,
like,
they
don't have borders.
And that's the other thing too. I'm always a little bit suspicious when I hear the left being sensible about migration, because I remember when we had the boats and all of that, they tend to want more numbers coming in. I guess they see them as on welfare. Therefore, they are constituents of Labor.
Yeah.
So I'm always a little bit, I don't want to put it down. It's a good idea going in the right direction, but there's just the cynic in me that says buyer beware.
Yeah, I think you might be right. Now, the last draconian Premier, Queensland's Anastasia Palaszczuk, has been slayed by the unions and has decided to resign to express some kind of renewal in the Labor Party in Queensland. Here she was in part yesterday.
Finally, last week, my mind was made up at National Cabinet. I was sitting there thinking this is the fourth Prime Minister. There are all these new faces around the Cabinet table. We got a great deal for Queensland, $4 billion. And I thought to myself, renewal is a good thing. When I led this party from an opposition of just 7 members, I said that the first election would be like climbing Mount Everest. I went on to climb that mountain twice more. I don't need to do it again. I have given it my all, and I've run a marathon. Standing here today with these flags alongside and standing up for the people of Queensland has been an honour of my life. I don't believe anyone who comes after me will know how humbling it is. To travel this state and meet so many amazing people.
She didn't want to go, Jim.
No, and I can understand that. I mean, it's Queensland. It's the top job in the state. And look, the good thing about her going, Chris, is that I'll never have to sit in front of my laptop again and to ask myself, how do I spell that name? It gets me every. So I tell you what I've written here: Palaszczuk, Palashay.
That's what I use all the time. Phonetic, see?
It blows my head away every time. But look, it was it Abraham Lincoln in 1863? He spoke about the government of the people, by the people, for the people, or some variation of that. But now it's government of the people, by the unions, for the unions.
Yes.
That's a twist on. But really, that really is what it comes down. They're telling her, they're putting the weights on, saying, hey, lady, election in October, I think it is next year, 4-year terms and all of that. You've done a great job, which I suppose she has. I'm not a Queenslander, although over COVID, she was brutal.
Ooh.
And the interesting thing, too, when you look at the last 12 months, I'm just looking here, you've got, or had, Mark McGowan. Now, he was an untouchable Labor rock star.
Yep.
And out of nowhere decided to pull the plug. I've heard reasons why that is. Spend more time with the family, nudge, nudge. Then, of course, there was Andrews and now Anastasia Palaszczuk.
Yeah.
And they were all reading the tea leaves and watching these, or she is now, or the unions are, watching these cumulonimbus storm clouds. You remember Saturday afternoon just gone?
Yeah.
Right, they're on the horizon. There's lightning and thunder and very, very frightening and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The unions are looking at that and thinking, maybe it's time to, as she said, renewal. And I think that's sensible.
Yeah.
Nobody lasts forever. Some people don't know when to go. Just before John Howard was voted out, it was suggested that perhaps he ought to, turn in the
hand the baton over to Peter Costello, and he should have done it.
Well, look, her God, and she should worship him every single day, is Campbell Newman.
Yeah,
he came in 2012. Lasted 2 and a bit years, I think it was, maybe whatever it was, but he got out over his skis, and so he didn't last a term. I thought a lot of the stuff that he was doing was stuff that needed to be done. It was a bit Trumpian, but it was stuff that needed to be done, and probably still is.
Yeah.
But the people weren't ready for it, and of course, once you get the media on the wrong side. And you've got a single chamber house in Parliament in Queensland. It doesn't have a Senate or an upper house, so you've just got that single house. But just on Newman, he won, it's incredible numbers, 78 seats in 2012, and Labor under Bligh won 7.
Yeah,
and
but
so
he scared the horses.
They couldn't
I'm
even
going to take a break.
team.
Yes, exactly. I've got to take a break, Jim. We've got stacks to get to. We'll come back with Jim Ball in a second on TNT Radio.
TNT Radio's Steve Malzberg.
13 Israeli hostages released as part of that ceasefire deal 49 days after they were taken hostage. 49 days. So that still leaves about 225 to 227 more hostages. I'm with John Bolton, the former national security advisor to Donald Trump. I'm with Britt Hume of Fox News. I'm with a bunch of other people who say this gives Hamas too much time to do whatever they want to do whatever they need to do, to regroup, to rearm, to re-strategize. And as much as you want the hostages back, it can't be at the expense of the other part of the mission, which is to destroy Hamas. So I think it's a mistake.
Steve Malzberg on TNT Radio.
The Light is Britain's far-right conspiracy theory paper spreading hate and vicious lies. No, that's what the BBC say. The Light is the only national newspaper bringing you the real news and informed opinion on what's really going on today. You can subscribe, order copies, submit articles, and read back issues on our website, thelightpaper.co.uk, and see for yourself why the establishment are so worried about the uncensored truth getting out to people every month. The Light Paper. Not far right, just right so far. thelightpaper.co.uk.
Are you sitting comfortably?
Oh, yes, yes.
Then I'll begin.
Even when you're just sitting around, we're rocking the talk.
Today's News Talk Radio, TNT.
Couple of quick comments from the chat box on tntradio.live, which, of course, you can participate in. One comment from Chris here. Don't make excuses for her. I don't think we were doing that. But anyway, She was a tyrant and an economic imbecile. Now she's been left in the hands of an even bigger imbecile, Giggles Miles. Well, Chris, I have a feeling that there's a tug of war going on between the union movement, maybe even party members, about what to do with the premiership. And Stephen Miles is a little bit on the nose. Which is understandable.
There's another woman from the same faction. I can't think of the name. She's putting her hand up.
Yeah.
But just before we move on, I was reading Jeff Chambers in The Australian 2 or 3 hours ago. It's one of those late breaking stories. Not a story, but just something to consider. He writes, Palaszczuk is the 8th member of the inaugural National Cabinet to either quit or lose an election. This was over COVID. They had a national cabinet.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to say, and you don't think these things happen slowly over time.
Yeah.
And so you don't stop to think, oh, okay, Dan Andrews went and this one went. But there are others, like Andrews went, McGowan's gone, Palaszczuk's gone, Scott Morrison's gone, Berejiklian's gone, Stephen Marshall, Peter Gutwein, I think it is, and Michael Gunner from the Northern Territory.
Yeah.
They were all in the inaugural National Cabinet when it was formed in 2020, 3 years ago, and they're all gone.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it works.
Yep, it does. Now, Australia's Home Affairs Minister Claire O'Neil has finally apologised for crimes allegedly committed by those released detainees, despite their fiery protestations last week. Talk about messy. Of course they should have apologised, Jim.
Well, look, I've lost count last time I looked, I think it was four of these
is
released,
right.
18 that have been arrested
Yeah,
for crimes since they were released.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you recall last Thursday, the front page of The Australian, it had Dreyfus and O'Neill.
Yeah.
And the image was just, I think the camera got right underneath them, but it had this condescending, finger pointing. The whole image was wrong.
Yeah.
And they were dripping with down the nose smugness and condescension, arrogance, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it basically gave the impression, just the whole performance, not just that image, but in Parliament, this is a government in panic on so many fronts.
Yeah.
This is just another one.
Yep.
And apparently, and I wish I could remember this morning, I was looking at this sometime, maybe it was last Friday or the weekend, there was an op-ed piece by an expert, a legal type expert, saying that the government didn't have to release anybody else except that one person.
That's right.
NZQ, whatever his name was.
They interpreted it completely wrong.
Yeah, they thought, we're going to let them all out. And no, but while they could have sat there for a month or 6 weeks while they formulated new legislation to keep them incarcerated. Yeah. So that, again, they panicked. Yeah. Thought, well, and Dreyfus said the other day, well, I'm not going to apologise because I am upholding the decision of the High Court. Yeah, nice try, but no.
Rubbish.
With regards to that one person, yes, but the rest, sorry. And they ought to be apologising.
Yeah, we didn't buy it. Now, former PM Paul Keating is now giving advice to Anthony Albanese. He says Albo should reform. The only problem is whenever Labor tries to reform anything, it just costs us taxpayers a lot of money. Yeah,
look, reform is code, shorthand, a euphemism, if you like, for turn the world up. Remember, Barack Obama in 2008 said he was going to fundamentally transform America. Yeah. Now, that program is still going on, and it is a dog's breakfast. So whenever they use phrases like transform or reform, there are areas of society and our economy that need all of that. But now and again, you got to think, okay, what exactly have you got in mind? But Keating, he's there in his leafy bolt hole in Bullara or Elizabeth Bay, wherever he lives these days. And look, you got to be honest. He had a bit of style about him. He was a bit of a roughhead in a way, and he had a bit of culture, the Zegna suits and the Marla and all the rest of it. And he had a way with words, and he could put down lines and good stuff like that. He was a performer in Parliament.
Yeah. He was colourful.
Colourful, that's right, like colourful racing identities.
Yeah.
and Albo's got none of that. He simply doesn't have...
Mr. Bland.
Very, very bland. He's so anodyne and vanilla and beige and whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But so there you've got... See, Howard, on the other hand, you've got to connect. You've got to have the ability to connect with the people. Howard had that. Howard's battlers, Howard's tradies had the ability to, and he was a liberal. I mean, the whole thing is turned on its head. The Labor Party is all about the arty elite, and the Libs, they're more about, a bit like Trump again, I suppose, they're more about the average man and woman in the suburbs. They're suburban.
Yeah, the middle Australians, middle
Howard
Americans.
identified that, and Howard was there for 10 years. Keating, giving advice, he lasted one term.
Yeah,
right?
Very true. Now, corporate giant and renewable evangelist Andrew Forrest has caused a stir in Dubai at COP28. He wants the world to deal with fossil fuel bosses by putting their heads on spikes. I'm sure you could have come up with better advice. Maybe you've got better advice for Twiggy, Jim.
Well, yeah, I've just got a bullet point here. I just wish this bloke would shut up. That's mine. Look, he used to project and does still try to project this image of the likable, woolly-haired, dog-eared, knockabout ocker, if you like, rugged and all of that kind of stuff. But he seems to have hooked up with and he's hooked up with the renewables and the climate cult.
Big time.
And this is what's driving him. I'm just looking here. I've written it down. Here it is. This will give you an idea where he's coming from. This was a headline back in October. Fortescue Energy boss says Forrest is betting his net worth on mega green hydrogen plants. That's what he's about. So what's in the way? Oil, gas, coal. They're all in the way.
Yeah.
And the thing is, if he was serious about the temperature rising by 1.5 degrees or whatever, and I want to come back to that in a second, that number, why, if he's so concerned about the climate and all the rest of it, the one thing he hasn't said anything about is nuclear. That's the answer. If you are serious, well, if you're not talking nuclear, you're not serious.
No.
And so if you want heads on spikes, well, yeah, okay, go for it, but start talking nuclear.
Yeah, base load.
Chris, quick question, no particular prizes. How do you smelt iron ore? That's what he digs up, iron ore. How do you smelt it? You need a furnace.
Yeah.
And you won't do that with renewables. You won't smelt iron ore with the renewables. But that 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, that's what we're trying to limit it to. Who came up with that number? I mean, for example, I'll give you an example. 1.5 degrees is less than the difference on any given day between Sydney's eastern suburbs and Sydney's western suburbs.
But they're classifying that temperature as climate breakdown. How?
I don't know. Sydney, just for the record, today in the eastern seaboard, it's 27 degrees. In the west, it's 6 degrees hotter, 33.
Yeah.
Right. So 1.5 degrees. Hello. That's nothing.
Yeah.
That's nothing. And look, this all goes back to, it's a long thing to go through, but it all goes back to 1850. That was when the little ice age ended. And of course, just as if you'd switched off your fridge, your little bar fridge to defrost it, you switch it off, open the door, and it melts. It warms up. And that's what happened. The switch was flicked. Well, nobody knows. The little ice age ran for 500 years, from 1300 to 1850.
Yeah.
So this whole business about 1.5 degrees, it's a number that's thrown around a lot, and once again designed to scare us, to spook us.
Of course it is. I've got to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere, Jim.
Right.
I want to talk to you about The Guardian in just a second. We'll get back to Jim Ball. I've got to get you some news, though, right here on TNT Radio. Let's get back to Jim Ball. On The Guardian newspaper, it's launched another pitch in Australia for funding to keep the lights on. $300,000 they're pleading for. I think that's a news source we could do without, but it sort of gets rather desperate when you're running around with your hand out looking for $300,000 to stay alive.
Well, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
You basically say, listen, people aren't buying what we're selling. Can you help us out? You're asking for donations. It's like community radio or some community newspaper. You're just scraping by. Look, they're a left-wing newspaper, and the fact that they're crowdsourcing $300,000 tells me that they're skating on the ice of a very thin and unsustainable business model.
Yeah.
If that's what the market you want to chase, well, go for it. Good luck.
Yeah.
And the point is, they've got a whole lot of other papers out there now. The Saturday paper, I think it's called. There's social media. There's podcasts, and people. And I'm just waiting for the day when, I don't know, the Murdochs or Nine, Sydney Morning Herald says that we're no longer going to be printing newspapers. Yeah. I think that time's coming, and probably coming sooner than we think.
Yeah, I think you're right, because people are getting their fix of media, not necessarily news, but media, from all these different avenues, including this particular avenue.
Just one more thing on that, Chris.
Yeah.
According to the Oz this morning, it says this new fundraiser. So have they done this before?
Yeah, they have. This is the third time, I think. Third time.
Wow, I didn't realize. I just
second time public, and this is the third time. Now, I want to ask you about
the editor-in-chief is on $1 million a year.
Is he?
Editor-in-chief Catherine Viner being granted a pay rise, which now sees a take-home income, a base salary of about $1 million.
Well, she can hand over the $300,000 and still get $700,000. She'll be fine.
Yeah, you'd think so.
All right. One last one. The activists in the Aussie theatrical community are ramping up their pro-Palestinian campaign as a third board member has resigned. I hate to see politics and sport. It's even worse when politics mixes with theatre. It's like it's like oil and water, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, they've got just people buy their tickets to go and see the show.
Yeah.
They don't go there to see your protest. This is an ego trip. This is all that. What do they call it? Can't think of the phrase on the top of my head.
Well, it's all that woke political correctness,
Correct. And this is the smug, again, the smug, that I love it. It applies to these people, the smug arty elite ramping up their protest.
Yeah. And
I'm not quite sure why they think they've got this mortgage on what's right and what's wrong. Do you remember back in the 1970s, there was a record called The Desiderata. And there was a line in there that applies to these people. The dumb and the ignorant, they too have their story.
Mm.
And we are talking about the dumb and the ignorant. I think the answer to this, Chris, the answer to their protest is meet it with a protest, and everybody attending should wear a Jewish yarmulke.
Yes.
You reckon that'll sort it out?
That'll upset them. That'll upset them.
Yeah.
I've got to run, Jim. I've run out of time, big time. Thank you, mate. Great to catch up. Let's do it again soon.
Okay. Thanks,
Good
Chris.
on you.
Bye.
Jim Ball, former 2UE and 2GB national radio host, and it's good to have him on the program. Very, very politically incorrect, which is exactly the way